Alright, this is going to be an interesting one. What's up guys, Anubhav here. Welcome back to a brand new video here on the channel. Today we are taking a look at the OG Android phone of its time, the Moto G first generation. Without any further ado, let's get started. Alright, so chances are if you're an Android fanatic of any time period, you have heard about the Moto G first gen and the impact that it had on the Android community back then when it was launched in 2013. Now in today's video we had the phone lying around courtesy to Utkarsh, and I thought, you know what, it would be really cool to revisit a phone that had been launched over 7 years ago and see what's what with the current generation smartphones, and if this is still usable as a primary device in case you would want to for some reason. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so first things first, I genuinely want to talk about how small this phone is. Seriously, I mean, this is a phone that has a 4.5-inch display, and it really gives us some perspective about how phones were sized back in the day before we got into this entire bigger equals to better sort of rule. And coming in at 4.5 inches, it has a 16:9 panel, which is something that you don't get to see in a lot of smartphones today, and the resolution is 1280 by 720p. So you've got an IPS LCD 720p panel coming in at a pixel density of 326 ppi. And honestly, other than the unholy amount of huge bezels on the sides as well as the tops, which feels a little bit unnatural, especially if you're using one of those modern current generation 2020 smartphones. And even though this is not the best AMOLED or OLED panel, it's an IPS panel, I can genuinely say that even after 7 years of this phone being launched, it is honestly not that bad. In fact, I would say that the colors are crisp, and because of the small form factor, the 720p along with 326 ppi, things look good on it, and by no means can you call this a phone that has a terrible display even by today's standards. Alright, with that said, you flip the device to the back and you find the infamous Moto logo with that cutout where you can put your index finger, is what we all used to do. It used to be this really cool matte finish, and you can actually pop this back cover open. So there are color customization options. There are more than 7 colors other than the black that it ships with, and you can customize them. And this is one of those phones where you can remove the back cover. I surely miss that in Android smartphones today. You cannot do that. However, once that is out of the way, you can see the battery, which is non-removable, your SIM card slots and your memory card slots, and the storage, which is the higher end model that we have with us. This is the 16 gigabyte version. And think about it, 16 gigabytes of storage is the highest end version of a phone, which also does not have expandable storage at all. That's all it took, 16 gigabytes. And if we compare it to today's standards, we have people complaining about filling their internal storage with coming in at 128 gigs for the base variant. It's totally crazy how much our usage has increased over the years, and how crazy it was to actually have a phone that is totally functional and the top end of that phone has 16 gigabytes of storage. It's totally crazy, and it's an insane perspective on how consumers have started using their phones for so much more in the current generation. Alright, now let's move on to the RAM, and drum roll please, this has 1 gigabyte of RAM, a full gigabyte. That's all you get on this phone. You can totally forget about playing PUBG in a phone like the Moto G first generation. In all seriousness though, back in the day with a quad-core chipset running on the Snapdragon 400 along with the Adreno 305 GPU and 1 gigabyte of RAM, this phone was very smooth for the time that it was launched for. And for you and for me, I don't know if you guys did this, but back in the day, Moto G first gen used to be a custom ROM haven for most of us out there because of the near stock Android experience that Motorola had got us. Speaking of which, the phone shipped with Jelly Bean and was upgradable to 5.1 Lollipop, which is what this phone is currently running on. And honestly, there are no major lags today while doing basic things, whatever it is that you do, browse the internet and whatnot. Alright, now let's go to the back of the device again and jump into the camera. And what can I say? Of course, there is no comparison of this phone with current generation smartphone cameras, because the thing is, smartphone cameras have gotten incredibly good in a very short amount of time in the last 2 or 3 years. However, this does have a camera which is a 5 megapixel sensor with an f-stop of f2.4, and you can shoot 720p at 30 frames per second. That's the maximum video quality that you can shoot. But the camera specs don't really matter, because this was not a phone that was aimed at being a camera centric phone. It was a budget smartphone with, mid-tier specifications, which was very cheap for the market that it was available in, and it just revolutionized the Indian smartphone market as we know it back in 2013. And if you really want to get in the camera samples, well, the photos are neither here nor there. Nothing is really great, and you can click pictures with it. And if you again move the device to the front, you've got the front camera, which is a 1.3 megapixel sensor, and I mean, you get what 1.3 megapixel sensors are capable of, I guess. One thing that I do like about the camera is the fact that, the UI of the application, the stock Moto UI of the camera app is really cool. And while the quality of the pictures are not that great, as you can see in the video, this really made me sort of nostalgic to browse through the menus and all the options that we have. And if we move to a lot of other miscellaneous things that you should mention when you're talking about a 2013 smartphone like the Moto G, is the fact that first, you still have the headphone jack. So headphone jack for the win. I guess in 2013 people preferred high quality audio compared to wires, which has obviously changed in the current days. That is good to see. You've also got a rear loud facing speaker. That is, well, not bad, I'd say, but it's just there. It's not going to compete with the dual front facing stereo speakers or the speakers that we have in current generation smartphones. And last but definitely not the least, this has a micro USB 2.0 cable for data transfer and charging. So no USB type C for all the cool kids out there who don't even know what a micro USB port is. So yeah, before USB type C, we had micro USB, and it was the OG, and you can still find it here. Now, as far as the battery goes, it comes with a 2070 mAh battery, and honestly, I remember this, having really good battery life back in the day. And even after 7 years, it holds up pretty well. Now, obviously, because of the specifications, you won't be doing some extraordinarily high-end stuff on this. And with the 4.5-inch 720p display, the battery management is really good. And this has decent battery life, I could say, even after 7 years of being launched. And I think that's all that this has to offer. And back in the day, this variant, the 16 gigabyte variant, you could get this for 14,000. And while there is genuinely no reason to get one right now, this phone was one of the most loved phones in the Android community, and it still is. If you look up XDA and the other Reddit subreddits out there, this phone was one of those phones that everyone was talking about and had a lot of support from the community. And I genuinely think that this is what essentially transformed the smartphone game in India from there, which is why I have immense love and respect for the Moto G lineup, the OG Moto G lineup. And I genuinely thought that this would be a great video to actually see how this ranks up to our current generation smartphone needs and whatnot. That is pretty much it. If you guys did like the video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you'd pick one of these up if this was available right now in the comments below. Until then, this is Anubhav signing out. I'll catch you guys next time. You guys have a great day. Peace out.